Recently, I've been a part of a larger debate as it affects the black world, and that is Pan-Africanism a scam? In its ideology, Pan-Africanism is not a scam. It's actually one of the greatest things that can benefit the black world. But on the other hand, its functionality is trash, which is why I've referred to it as not just Pan-Africanism, but Pan-Scamanism. And a colleague of mine in the Pan-African YouTube community has come out to rebut some of my ideas, and Tariq Nasheed as well.
And all that tribalism that people like FBA talk about and ADOS, that's ethno-nationalism. FBA is a ethno-nationalistic movement, just like those East Africans who are ethno-nationalist, meaning they're nationalists to their ethnicity, meaning they only care about their ethnicity. They don't care about their race. They care about their ethnicity. They're tribalist.
Now, in this particular case, he's not calling out Tariq Nasheed by name, but he is calling out #FBAs. He argues that black Americans are those who consider themselves #FBAs do not care about the race of people, but instead we care about our own ethnicity. In other words, we are not concerned about what happens worldwide with blacks, but now we're only concerned with ourselves. Now, here's an issue that I have with Afro Think Tank here. There has been times where black Americans, or at least people in America, cared a lot about the issues of Africa.
You go to Nigeria, which is, if not the most corrupt nation in Africa, and it could be the most corrupt nation in the world, Minister Farrakhan.
Oh, now, Mr. Wallace.
It is the most corrupt nation that I have ever covered. I've been there 25 years ago, and I've been there as recently as last year.
Fine.
Now, in this case, the legendary Mike Wallace is saying that Nigeria is the most corrupt nation on planet Earth. But Louis Farrakhan, who had just did the Million Man March prior to that, responds to his claims.
So what? 35 years old. That's what that nation is. Now here's America, 226 years old. You love democracy, but there in Africa, you're trying to force these people into a system of government that you just have accepted. 30 years ago, black folk got the right to vote. You're not in any moral position to tell anybody how corrupt they are. You should be quiet and let those of us who know our people go there and help them get out of that condition. But America should keep her mouth shut wherever there's a corrupt regime, as much hell as America has raised on the earth.
Louis Farrakhan shut Mike Wallace completely down in front of the entire nation on 60 Minutes. And so many people in black America was rooting for Louis Farrakhan because he took the side of Nigeria. Louis Farrakhan didn't agree. He could have agreed with Mike Wallace, but he didn't. And the reason why he didn't, because in the 90s, that was the black American stance with Africa. In the 80s, when Nelson Mandela got out of prison and basically took over the ANC, black Americans were some of the biggest supporters of the ANC and of Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela rewarded black Americans. There's actually a documentary right here on YouTube called Blacks Without Borders, Chasing the American Dream in South Africa, where you have black Americans contributing a lot to the economy because our communities were closer back then. So what changed, Afro Think Tank?
The same FBA be talking about, that's what they do. Because FBA is a group of African Americans that don't care about black people globally. They don't care about their race. They only care about their specific group of North American Africans that's in America. That's the only thing they care about. That's their priority.
He argues here the priority for foundational black Americans is each other and not anybody else. Technically, he's right. Those black Americans or African Americans who consider themselves #FBA, this is their priority. But from what I have shown you, that has not always been the priority. We see evidence that at a particular time, it was not this way. And I want to use Tariq Nasheed as an example. He also was not that way.
I've been all over Africa. Show me single parenthood in Africa today. You don't have a bunch of single mothers running around having babies just to be having them, or teen mothers in Africa, unless it's like a war-torn country. You don't have that. You don't have a bunch of incest going on over there in Africa. Go back into ancient Africa, especially West Africa. You didn't have dudes rape each other. You didn't have that. A lot of the stuff that we pick up, we got directly from being victimized by the white supremacists. That's a fact. Even our eating habits. Look at if you go back in history, Africans were the healthiest people on the planet.
Now, Tariq Nasheed is giving Africa props. He's talking about the things that he sees that are beneficial in Africa that he doesn't see here. And largely, there are many things that I can agree with him on, especially when it comes to the family setting. Yeah, there's a lot of things that Africa does right, to be honest. But then how did Tariq Nasheed go from that to this?
People are desperate with trying to force us to identify as an African. Now, racially, we're African people. Racially, ethnically, we are a different group. Ethnically, we're foundational Black Americans.
Now, in this case, Tariq Nasheed is still arguing that he has ancestrally African DNA, but he also argues for something different.
I acknowledge my African racial inherent DNA and the connection I have with other African descended people globally. We have a connection as far as intrinsic race and biology. So I acknowledge that. No problem with that. When I travel to Africa or any other place where there are Black people, I see a commonality with that. But we're also a people who have a very unique ethnic background, and that's us being foundational Black Americans. That goes just beyond the skin tone.
The argument that he has is, while we are genetically the same, and when I do feel drawn to certain Blacks, when I see them, we are a different ethnic group. Now, it's always been the case that we are a different ethnic group, but now there is a difference. And that difference is what you consider delineation. In the last 8 to 9 years, Tariq Nasheed has been pushing for this level of delineation from the Black world. And many people have accused him of grifting. And to be honest, I could see that before. But to be honest, I'm gonna tell you why I don't think that anymore. Number one, if Tariq Nasheed wanted to be a grifter, it was much easier to do that under the umbrella of Pan-Africanism. Why not talk about a message that everybody else is talking about, and then you could extend your influence to all over the world? I mean, he could be in Nigeria, he could be in South Africa, he could produce his films here in America, and he wouldn't just be alienating himself to one community. So for him to push delineation, it actually hurts him monetarily, because to be in the quote unquote Pan-Africanism is actually extending his market. But what he has noticed, and he's not the only one, he's gonna argue 4 points. Number one, Pan-Africanism is one-sided or unbalanced. This is largely true, okay? Even in times where I didn't want to come out and all the way say this, but it's absolutely true. Pan-Africanism does not serve the interests of Black Americans in the United States. In other words, Pan-Africanism is the monetary backbone of funding what happens in Africa. The Pan-African initiatives focus on the African continent broadly, but do not sufficiently include or benefit the diaspora in tangible ways. This is largely true and cannot be denied. And this is the issue with somebody like Afro Think Tank, who he's talking about the symptoms of the issue. Afro Think Tank describes the attitude of these Black Americans, or hashtag FBA, as to why they're feeling this way. We talk about the one-sided or unbalanced ideologies of Pan-Africanism in practice. It's hard to overcome. It is one-sided, and I'm a person that's in the Pan-African community, and I can tell you it's definitely one-sided. Now, it is getting a little bit better, but it's also costing Black Americans a lot more. And Pan-Africanism comes at a greater cost for Black Americans. For example, whenever you talk to Black Americans about Africa, you always hear this: oh, you need to come back to your roots. You need to come back home. What that tells a Black American psychologically is what they know about themselves now is not really them. You need to get in contact with your true self, which is Africa, in which you'll really be home and you'll really understand who you are. In other words, who you are now is fake. And so that creates a level of self-doubt. So Africans who are already into Africa, they are the true Africans, and they don't need to find out who they are, but you need to find out who you are. So it automatically pushes you in a situation where you must be immersed in with them. But this doesn't happen for other Africans on the continent. When you see Eritreans in Uganda, or certain Somalians in East Africa, they already know who they are, so that can't be beat with them or used against them as leverage. But this tactic is always used on Black Americans as leverage, and it costs Black Americans a lot of money, and it also stresses Black Americans mentally. We need to go back to our motherland where we feel that we are home, but in actuality, you're not going to be treated as if you are home, and it forces you to cover territory that Africans don't have to cover. You have to invest on getting to know who you are, because you're somewhere looking for your lost father. You're somewhere looking for your lost mother, even though your lost father or your lost mother is the one that sold you. Tariq Nasheed points out frustration with African governments and diaspora connections. Tariq Nasheed points out how unfair African governments are towards Black Americans when it comes to dual citizenship. I believe many years ago he was arguing for this in Zimbabwe, and he could not make it happen, and that's probably one of the reasons why he went in the direction that he did. He also argues that the promises of Pan-Africanism, which is solidarity, shared rights, mutual support between Africa and the diaspora, haven't been fulfilled in a way that benefits the diaspora. And this is actually true. There is no fairness in Pan-Africanism in practice. And so if Pan-Africanism is unfair, there is only one way to make it fair. That is delineation. And see, this is never addressed. Afro Think Tank never addresses this. Pan-Africanists who have a problem with Tariq Nasheed's rhetoric never addresses this. Now, this isn't to say that I agree with all of Tariq Nasheed, what he does, and some of the name calling he has against other groups. Clearly, I don't agree with that. But when he talks about pure ideology, this cannot be debunked. What happens is people try to force African Americans or Black Americans into flat blackness.
Peace to the tribe. So one of the reasons why I don't identify as any of these new online self-identifiers like Salon, FBA, and ADOS is because they're all ideologies with hidden agendas. So Black Americans are delineating because we want to focus on ourselves. We want our own spaces that are solely for Black Americans, and we don't have to ask for these things. We don't need permission. We have been through so much in this country, and it's okay to love only us and embrace our culture, our history, and our heritage.
Shout out to my brother from Secure the Tribe. He's on TikTok. Check him out. He always has some really good stuff. I'm trying to interview him one of these days. Like I said, shout out to the young brother, right? And he makes a point that, listen, we don't want to be under flat blackness because we want to make sure that we are who we are. For so long, we've been worried about somebody else. And that's what flat blackness does. Flat blackness makes a single undifferentiated identity, right? And basically all Black people think, live, or struggle in the same way. And this produces flat blackness. And this is a problem because it hides structural inequalities inside Black communities. It lets brands or governments claim inclusion without addressing real diversity. It causes tension between African Americans, continental Africans, and Caribbeans because we are expected to have certain identical outlooks. And this is what Pan-Africanism tries to do. Pan-Africanism tries to establish flat blackness. And in order for all Blacks to kind of work together, you kind of have to establish flat blackness. And I get it to a certain level, but at the same time, it doesn't give any real value to many Black Americans in the same way because you are pushing flat blackness. And when you push flat blackness on a whole group, you diminish their issues and you diminish their problems. But here's the flip side. Africans and Caribbeans don't really agree with flat blackness. They typically are themselves. They claim themselves. Go and look at their Instagram pages and look at their flags they have. They don't agree to this, but Black Americans somehow must agree to this, all right? 3, Tariq Nasheed reframes his focus towards foundational Black Americans. The broad flat blackness diaspora framing dilutes specific history and reparations orientation of Black Americans that come from slavery, all right? If you continue with flat blackness, you can allow a Nigerian American or a Jamaican American also get reparations for Black American or hashtag FBA or hashtag the original Negro or the original Afro-American reparations bit. And that's the issue, and people will do that. People will use flat blackness to benefit from Black Americans, but will never give anything back. And lastly, Tariq Nasheed points out that neo-colonial African states do not care about their own citizens, all right? So he's skeptical about Pan-Africanism. If you do not care about your own citizens in Africa, how can you care about Black Americans? Many, if not all, African governments are failing their own populations, so you will definitely fail Black Americans, not because you're trying to, but because you're already failing. So then how can the Black diaspora or Black Americans trust you? These are arguments that Pan-Africanists tend to not want to address. And me as a person in the Pan-African community, I'm not arguing in bad faith. If I feel that my positions can change, they have changed. It doesn't mean that I'm not in the Pan-African community, but I do want the truth. I do not want Black Americans to suffer in Africa. I do not want Black Africans to suffer in Africa. But these things must be addressed to make a better Africa and a better Black world. The same things that I'm addressing here. Ugandans address these when they go to Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Nigerian Americans, Nigerians in Canada, Kenyans. People that listen to what I'm talking about understand that these things happen in Africa. And what Tariq Nasheed addresses, although, yes, he does use language in which I wouldn't use towards Africa, but at the same time, these are things that the Pan-African community wants to sweep underneath the rug. And that's the problem. In Africa, a lot of stuff gets swept underneath the rug. It's a cultural thing. Black Americans, we want this conflict with Pan-Africanism. Those of us who really FBA by lineage or Black Americans want a relationship with Africa, we want to force this conflict to get a better resolution. So if delineation is that conflict, then it must be delineation, because it is better to delineate than to be taken advantage of or to be used, like what happened with Dr. Farrakhan and the ADDI. Dr. Farrakhan basically had a situation in which, she had all these Black Americans getting promised for citizenship for Burkina Faso. They paid all this money and they didn't get it. They ended up getting permanent residency. But at the same time, this is problematic because you're promising to deliver something that you can't do. And everybody sweeps this behavior underneath the rug. So guys, what do you think? It's your boy Oshay Duke Jackson back at it again with another episode here on the channel. I'm out.